I recently watched a years-old video by David Sandberg, director of Shazam and also some scary stuff. I just recently learned that the guy has had a YouTube channel for more than a decade, and since starting out in Hollywood, he's been doing some really interesting behind-the-scenes stuff there. This particular video was about the making of the trailer for his debut feature, the horror film Lights Out. And in it, he mentions complaints that he had heard from people that the trailer gave too much away. He said the criticisms were fair, but that there was something more to it. You see, in the trailer, there is an entire exposition dump of a conversation, as well as several other lines of voiced-over dialogue that were shot/recorded solely for the trailer. They're not in the movie, and were never going to be in the movie. The folks who cut it wanted their 2.5-minute spot to feature something like a complete narrative, so custom stuff had to be made. This was such a clarifying moment for me and my sheer hatred of movie trailers. And in particular, trailers like the one for Takashi Miike's 103rd directorial project, First Love, which is a really great trailer and also a total lie. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me a guy who probably says I love you too early in relationships. And today, I'm talking about First Love. While he's probably best known over here for his horror classics, particularly Audition, you really don't know what you're going to get from a Takashi Miike film. Those 100 credits run the gamut from horror to family-friendly fantasy to historical drama to what may be the only genuinely great video game adaptation out there, though it's not the best video game movie. And basically anything else you can think of. While some are more successful than others, a misstep quickly fades because there is always something new right around the corner. And critically, this variety has allowed his work to remain interesting even after all these releases. You can't really get Miike fatigue when Miike means so many things. While horror blew him up over here, he's probably best known in general for crime thrillers. And with First Love, he's giving it the classic slow burn sort of comedy with some low-key romance and also horror elements twist. Perhaps not the most obvious choice for a movie called First Love, and indeed, I'm pretty sure that the title is a joke being played on the audience. Like, you see that name, and you watch the trailer with its use of the 50s throwback, Do You Remember by French singer Pierre Terrassi, and on-screen text setting up a whirlwind romance, and you think, sure, love, why not? That same trailer leads you to believe that it is action-packed from start to finish, like anytime there isn't romance, there's bloodshed, and maybe there's even bloodshed during the romance. But none of that is really true. When I said slow burn before, I meant it. The development of that romance is far more subtle, kind of happening without you even realizing it, and certainly not being the focus you would expect given the gosh damn name of the thing. And as far as violence, well, one of the first things you see is a straight-up sword decapitation by some Yakuza, so it seems like you're in store for something pretty hardcore. But the reality is that there is quite some time before anyone else meets their maker, and much longer before any kind of sustained action sequences. And almost every piece of action footage from the trailer is, as a result, from the film's climactic battle in its last 20 minutes or so. I have a particular hatred for movie trailers that use anything from ending sequences, and so to see just how much of it is in use here makes me genuinely furious. So Alec, you might be saying at this point, why not stop telling us what it isn't and tell us what it is? You know what, fair point. The ostensible romantics are Leo, an up-and-coming orphaned boxer, and Monica, a drug-addicted young woman who was sold into sexual slavery by her father. Monica gets caught up unknowingly in this big scheme to rip off a Yakuza family by a traitor in their midst, and while she is running away from a corrupt cop who she doesn't even realize is actually in the process of kidnapping her because she is too busy hallucinating her abusive father, Leo just so happens to be walking by and clotheslines the cop, causing her to hallucinate him as someone from her childhood, at which point she grabs him and they run. You know, romance. And if you think that sounds complex, well, I am massively oversimplifying things. But it's not nearly as difficult to keep track of what's actually going on in the film as in those few sentences of summarization, because in the film, each new scene only really pushes forward one or two of the threads. Information is doled out slowly enough that you never get overwhelmed. Plus, most of the characters are pretty one note, so you don't have to worry too much about them. By the time everything crashes together in spectacular fashion, you know who everyone is, what they want, and whether or not you care if they get it. For my part, I didn't really care. I, of course, wanted the lovebirds to survive on a superficial level, them being the only objectively not awful people caught up in this whole mess. But practically speaking, if things had gone awry for any and every one of them, it would have been fine. It's a bad move to get too attached to characters in a Takashi Miike movie, so I stepped back and let him take me where he wanted me to go. I was just along for the ride. And it is quite the ride. As I said, it's fairly easy to keep track at any given moment, but there is a lot going on. And a lot of what's going on involves lying and double-crossing, so various characters are taking out their frustrations on absolutely the wrong targets, and in most cases, that target is Monica, who has done basically nothing to anybody. Even though it is much more dialogue-focused than I expected, it still moves at a fairly quick pace and is often genuinely funny. Scenes don't outstay their welcome, and what we've got to look at is always interesting. You know, I have a particular appreciation for highly stylized Miike, and First Love is definitely that. It's probably because everyone else keeps calling it Tarantino-esque that I got some of those vibes in there as well. But now that I've said it, you will also definitely feel that too, especially in some of the interesting ways he uses long takes to really emphasize the spaces that characters are in. Also, the whole slow build to blood-soaked chaos thing, though Miike's been doing that for decades, so whatever. In my review of Bong Joon-ho's Parasite earlier this week, I briefly mentioned scale and the fact that even though much of that film takes place in a single house, it doesn't feel like a limitation as much as a genuine artistic choice. And also that you can tell when a budget isn't quite where the director wants it to be. When I wrote that line, I was thinking about First Love. Of course, technical and financial limitations are an inevitable result of at least annual releases, and some things will get hit by those harder than others. First Love feels like a kind of side project in that sense, albeit one made with a lot of passion. It isn't that the film feels cheap, per se, but it does feel limited. There are scenes that could have benefited from a bit more grandeur. And in retrospect, I wish there had been more than just one use of anime-like animation to do that. In one brief sequence, just goes full-on cartoon, which is so out of nowhere that my brain hurt afterwards. But it was much better than using more traditional CGI to do that moment. And considering how rough the regular CG is elsewhere in the film, it would have made a probably superior alternative to get around some of the other technological limitations they were faced with. I think this could have been used to really expand some key moments in fun and mind-bending ways, so isolating it to just the once seems a shame. But maybe the one-off nature is part of the appeal of this whole endeavor. Whatever its influences, First Love feels distinctly singular. Many of Miike's films have been adaptations, which makes sense given the size of his filmography. But of course, being able to work entirely outside the confines of an existing property affords that much extra freedom to be ever so slightly more Miike. And if Miike is what you want, boy howdy does First Love got it. 7.4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons. my mom, Hamreen Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, and at BlasianFMA. If you like this video, that's awesome. If not, I'm sorry. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.